Shoot 'em ups are some of my favorite type of games. There's something so timeless about starting the game, not having to go through some long-winded tutorial, and shooting everything in sight. So today on the Big Retro Show, I'm going to be talking about some shmups that lived on the PS1. Einheinder is one of these shmups that's easy to pick up and get right into the action. It's a game that has a weird name, but that's okay. It won't stop you from having fun. This is a 2.5D shoot 'em up that is one of the best that the PS1 has to offer. It was made by Square. Yup, the same Square that's famous for all those Final Fantasy games. How good could a shmup be from the people who brought you the finalist of the fantasies? The answer is, you'd be surprised. Your aircraft reminds me a bit of the one in RType in that you can attach weapons to your ship and do crazy amounts of damage. As the story goes, you are sent to Earth to try and stop an invading alien force. The story really isn't important. All you have to know is that you must shoot everything in sight. It's easier said than done. Your ship is armed with a standard machine gun, but you can upgrade your weaponry with various weapons your enemies drop when you defeat them. You get to choose from 3 ships that have their own strengths. For example, one of the ships allows you to carry more weaponry, but is less maneuverable. Another ship is easier to pilot, but only lets you carry 1 weapon. The weapons are a joy to use and consist of machine guns, cannons, missiles, and various other instruments of destruction. You can choose where to mount the weapon on your ship, which comes in handy depending on what angle you are trying to hit the bosses at. It gives the game a sense of strategy. The enemies and bosses in this game are actually not that difficult to fight at all. But full disclosure, I was playing this game on easy mode to try and get as much footage of the later levels as I could. The game isn't as challenging as some of these arcade shoot 'em ups that are famous for taking your quarters, but I kinda like that. The graphics and music in this game are pretty good for a PS1 title. The game switches from a 2D perspective to a 2.5D perspective, and while it doesn't really add anything to the game, it's still pretty cool. Einheinder is a pretty cool shmup that you can play on the old school PS1, and a great way to start off this episode. In the Hunt is one of those shooters that is very difficult to put down. That's probably why Irem was laughing all the way to the bank taking everyone's quarters back in the day when this debuted on the arcade circa 1993. Well, the trusty old PS1 received a port of the original arcade game that's every bit as fun. In the Hunt is different from any other shmup out there in that you pilot a submarine and the combat takes place both underwater and on its surface. You are attacked from above and below in this game and things get hairy pretty quickly. Luckily, the game allows you to fire missiles in the air, torpedoes straight ahead of you, and depth charges below, so you pretty much have all angles covered. The game also lets you power up weapons with icons dropped by enemies. It's really nothing we haven't seen before, but it's still fun nonetheless. The graphics and sounds of this game have that classic Irem flair that you see in games like Undercover Cops and Gun Force 2, and I really enjoy that signature look. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, visit the video I did on Irem arcade games linked in the description of this video. Anyhow, finding the enemies in this game is both fun and visually satisfying as the enemies are destroyed in the most colorful ways. The boss fights in this game are fun as well, and rather forgiving, especially if you play this game alongside a friend. The game's story went over my head, meaning I wasn't paying attention to it, but that's par for the course, given I really don't care about stories in arcade shoot 'em ups. I just want to kill, and kill some more. In the Hunt is an excellent game for the PS1, and in case you missed it on that system, this game was also ported to a lot of other systems, including the PS4 and the Switch, so check it out and let me know in the comments how you like it. If you've been watching the Big Retro Show for any length of time, you'll know that I love Ryden. I look for excuses to play this game every chance that I get, and it appears that I have one with Ryden Project for the PS1. Ryden Project is a mashup of the original arcade version of Ryden and Ryden 2, which I wasn't familiar with until I started playing this game. In case you don't know what Ryden is, it's essentially one of the granddaddy of shmups, and really helped define the genre back in the day. This game is dated on the PS1, but that's okay. It's still fun to play. Your ship is armed with a wimpy machine gun that you need to power up quickly by collecting jewels dropped by specific enemies, if you plan on surviving the game, that is. In the original Ryden, you get to choose between a powerful laser beam or a spread gun. That's really pretty much it. Your ship is also armed with bombs and you will be using them especially against the bosses. I always try to conserve them for the bosses because they are extremely challenging. In Ryden 2 you get much of the same action as you do with Ryden 1 and it's a bit more polished. There is the addition of a new rapid fire beam as well. I personally stick with the spread attack in both games as it covers most of the screen, but I can't deny the power of the laser as it kills enemies more quickly, which also comes in handy. While this is not my favorite version of the game, that honor goes to the good old TurboGrafx 16 version, it's still a worthy shoot 'em up on the PS1 and one that you will want to pick up and play if you love the genre as much as I do. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with RType. I grew up playing it on the good old Sega Master System, and even then my relationship was rocky. It's not that I don't like side-scrolling shoot-em-ups, or its chief gameplay mechanic, which is an orb that attaches to your ship, or detaches to help you cover more ground. I think it's always been its difficulty, and much like the other games in this series, RType Delta is a challenging shmup that will equal parts dazzle you and make you want to pull your hair out. In RType Delta, you get to choose from 3 different ships, each with their own special attacks and attributes. Another thing about this game is that it allows you to variably speed up your ship with the press of a button. As you guessed it, each ship has its own speed limits. One of the things that makes this game easier, at least for me, is a rapid fire button. If you press it, your ship's main weapon sprays bullets until eternity, or until you get hit, which will be quite often. The aforementioned orb allows you to soak up some of the bullets and enemies that come flying at you in this game, but they still can break through if you don't hit them head on. You really have to master using the orb as both a shield and a way to spread your firepower along the playfield. Each stage is jam-packed with enemies and bosses that get progressively difficult as you beat the level. The game allows you 4 continues, which is nowhere near enough to get far. Luckily, there are ways to get unlimited continues, unlimited ships, invincibility, you be a cheater. One of the best aspects of RType Delta are its graphics. They are among some of the best on the good old PS1. The music is pretty great itself. I mean, for shmup music, it's pretty decent. I had a lot of fun playing this game for this episode, even though I got my ass handed to me most of the time. It's still worth a game to look into if you love a good shmup. There's a lot to like about Ray Crisis. It's the 3rd game in Taito's Ray series, and it's a winner. In Ray Crisis, you take on the role of a computer virus called a Wave Rider, who must take out a supercomputer that is invading the Earth. I know, who cares? This is an arcade shmup after all, and I sure didn't. I just wanted to blow things out of the sky. Ray Crisis is an overhead 3D shmup that mixes fast-paced gameplay, big boss fights, and a play mechanic that I'm not too sure I like. More on that later. Ray Crisis controls are simple. You can shoot your standard weapon, which changes depending on the ship you use. Your ship also has a special attack and a lock-on attack. Oh boy, the lock-on attack. I guess the developers put it in to mix things up a bit, but to me it slows things down, mainly because while you're busy adding targets to your targeting queue, you become a target for the many ships that want to blast you out of the sky. I won't deny though that once you target the enemies and unleash your attack, it's downright satisfying. Each of the different ships allows you to lock onto a specific number of targets, which is useful during the boss fights. Let's talk about those next, shall we? The boss fights all rely on the targeting system, and it can be difficult trying to get your lock on because the bosses are quite targeting mechanisms themselves. They are typically multi-part boss fights, so get ready to die. I mean, a lot, during your playthrough. The regular ships and playfields aren't too difficult to navigate, and I do appreciate that. The game's graphics and sounds are some of the best I have seen on the good old PS1. Ray Crisis may not be the best shmup on the system, but it sure is worthy of your playtime, especially if you like these type of games, which I do. This game would be a lot better, in my opinion, if there was a way you didn't have to rely on the targeting system so much. Certain enemies can only be beaten with the targeting attack. It's frustrating, but it's doable. And that's gonna be it for the Big Retro Show. If I missed one of these shmups that you love on the PS1, please let me know in the comments, and I may do a part 2 with your answers. Thank you for watching the Big Retro Show. Consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a thumbs up, and I will catch you next time.